we understand stories. We remember information better when it's presented to us as a story.
That's Michael Butler. He's the founder of Think About Content and writes, edits, and develops content strategies for some of the largest brands in the world. You're talking AWS, Microsoft, big banks, big insurers. He's there. He is at the absolute top of the game. Now, the reason I wanted to talk to him, I went and built a huge AI workflow to build out thousands of blogs, and I just hit a wall of quality I could not get past. So I went back to fundamentals. I had to ask Michael, what is best practice? Like, what should writing look like in the SaaS and in the marketing space in 2024? So let's jump into the workflow that I built out. So the AI approach I used was basically data layering. I sought and found a niche group of keywords. Those keywords you'll find often have industry expert opinions and advice and answers already on LinkedIn. So top voices on LinkedIn already talking about it. You can grab those quotes, pull them directly in. Then I had an AI agent, Tavili in this instance, also answer that question. Put that in Perplexity AI to get a current news kind of answer or summary of that information. So we've got kind of two AI agents and some expert opinion coming in. We also have the H1, H2, and the first paragraphs of the top 5 organic ranking articles to give us that structure and what are those headings, what are those key talking points to provide to the AI as context. All of this comes through into a JSON file that is built out. So we have all of this context sitting here against any keyword we want to rank for. So that's how we get to this idea of getting enough context to create thousands of articles, right? Then we pull it into ChatGPT. I'll share this link so you guys can actually see this as well. What is the task I'm asking you to do? How to actually conduct and use the research I'm providing, and then the response I'm looking for. All of that data I then pulled into multiple different writing tools, right? Sonic, ChatGPT, Jasper. All of them came back with semi-similar or hallucinating content, which I wasn't really in love with. Now, what I did like was the ability to ask questions of the blog it created. Give me an image, ask and answer questions from the perspective of an audience member, like what are these likely to come up, have some FAQs at the bottom of your blog, and then do a listicle style thing. And then the final step of the workflow, throw it into Grammarly, which is a ChatGPT model, to clean it up and make sure that it is as best practice as it can be. Now, while I thought it was pretty nice and it was okay, it didn't have that humanity to it. And that's what we're going to chat to Michael Butler about right now and get back into the conversation of what is best practice. It would be good to maybe give a bit of a rundown on your perspective on how you do discovery and what you're kind of feeling as best practice at the moment.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think you can use both. AI certainly has its place as a basic research tool, but in terms of using it for producing final content, I think it's laughably bad. The test copy that you generated using best practices was just bland, generic, full of buzzwords, leveraging this, utilizing that, transforming, revolutionizing, etc. It just read like really, really boring, generic copy. And for a brand to put something like that out there on their website or on a social media platform or in any other form of communication, I think most people would read it and just forget about it, which is not what you want. And a really critical reader would read about it and think, these guys, they're taking the mickey. They can't even be bothered to make good content. It's that whole piece about content representing your brand and your brand facing the world in the right way. So I think the best practice is in terms of content production is certainly to use AI tools to do some research and gather information. That's what it's really good at. But when it comes and understanding audiences and all the other functions it can perform, but when it comes to actually generating the content, I think we still need humans. And even if you gave that output to a writer and said, "Can you fix this?" the writer, you may as well get them to do it from scratch, because it would require so much fixing that it'll be simpler just to give somebody a brief, give them the research, here's the brief, here's the audience, here's the objective, and so on, and please write us a good blog. because what the AI can't really do is have a through line and have a story. And what typically makes content good is that it has a point of view and it's saying something. It has a point to it. And AI generated content is certainly not there yet.
Michael, I love AI. I was hoping it would solve all of my problems. But the truth
Look,
is, maybe I'm just a little bit too close to it and enjoy it a little bit too much that when I read AI content, I'm like, looks about normal.
well, look, I think I think you might be too much into the. Maybe I'm too much of a romantic, and obviously still invested in human writing, but it'll meet in the middle. AI will get better. Of course, it will. It's a lot of it is just it's an engineering problem, and the engineering always gets better. What will hold AI back is the human factors behind it. And we've already seen in early models, and I believe these problems are mostly gone now, AI had racial biases, AI had gender biases, it had economic biases because of the selection of data that was used to feed it. What does a normal human look like? If you only feed it pictures of one particular kind of person, male, female, black, white, whatever, then that's what it thinks a human is. Those problems will go. They will be solved. But it is those inherent biases, I guess, or really fundamental problems with the way that the data is selected and manipulated. They are what will hold it back, and addressing them will require not just engineers. It will require artists. It will require creators to give AI systems that deep understanding of all the sorts of things I've just been talking about. Maybe if that all happens, then maybe I'm the turkey walking into the oven on Thanksgiving Day, to use an American example. But it's not at the engineering level that it fails. It fails at the human conceptual level.
When it comes to brands that may have been using outsourcing in the past and potentially writers from overseas or not within the local audience or target market, what's your perspective on, I suppose, we've got AI as this trajectory that's coming up. We have the outsourcing market and SEO outsourced services. And then we kind of have this in-depth kind of model of jumping in and really interviewing and diving into ideas and expanding out briefs. What's your kind of thoughts in this area? What could you enlighten
Yeah,
us
I
with?
I don't think AI solves that problem, and it comes down again to understanding your audiences. Um, and you'll be very fortunate to get a foreign call center that can do that. So if you're using an offshore group data from another culture, from another market, from another the perspective, then they're not going to be able to communicate, no matter how good. And some of those offshore places, like they can write, but they don't have the nuances and the proper understanding of local markets, local conditions, local idioms. Depending on the level of your communication and how formal you want your language to be, there is a place for informal language and sort of common turns of phrase. And I've certainly been in situations at an agency we both worked at where there was some copy produced that referred to was a good example, referred to Australia as a wide brown land, and one of the editors who wasn't of Australian background took that out because he thought it was a terrible phrase, not understanding that it was a more or less part of our culture. That's maybe an unfair example, but those are the kind of things that will make a piece of copy not ring true if somebody has written it that isn't sort of in touch with the culture and the audience in the background. So, obviously I'm self-interested, but I would say you should always hire a good local content person or agency to produce your content, because they will be just plugged in automatically to a whole bunch of cultural and linguistic conventions and sensitivities that you're not going to get from AI, and that you're extremely unlikely to get from an outsourced provider or an offshore.
Michael, I put together a bit of that video that a few people will have just watched. Maybe they skipped to just your section. Was there anything that you were kind of interested in exploring, or were surprised that AI can do, or were just shocked at the lack of quality?
I think it's I wasn't really so much shocked at things that AI can do, because I keep a bit of an eye on it, and I just, Moore's law, right? Things go faster and faster all the time, so these systems will improve faster and faster over time. Um, I was shocked, and again, from my self-interest perspective, a little relieved that the content was so poor, so generic. I think in terms of its usability for businesses, um, you could probably use AI really well to generate, and it's the same old story, right? You get it to do the grunt work, so product descriptions. Maybe it's great for generating product descriptions, because really just listing facts and information. But I think at this stage of the game, anything that requires like a story or a narrative through line, again, I've not seen AI content that really delivers on the goods. And the closest you get are things that read like a pastiche of somebody else's writing. And the whole point of marketing, as I've always understood it, is to produce content that is unique to you, that could only come from you, that represents your brand, your business, your organization uniquely. And I don't think that any amount of feeding AI your style guide or your company documents is really going to get it there. I think there is still a need for a human to put in that sort of narrative through line, and that consistency that ties all of your content together, that little invisible thread that runs through all of it, across your website, across your social media, across everything, that a good content team will provide, because they understand who you are, what you represent, and who your audience is, and the way you want to communicate with them. And I haven't seen an AI system yet that can ingest all of that and produce content that is meaningful, and frankly, content that is human, that reads like it is a human being communicating to another human being. A lot of the AI content is very I feel like I should read it out in a robot voice. It just doesn't. It just doesn't sound
When
very
you
great
start
idea.
with a new client, what does
Mm,
discovery look like? How do you uncover these story angles and build out this throughput that you see as this valuable human element within writing?
mm. Well, I think you start just by getting to know the client, and that may well involve looking at AI generated, content and data that they've generated. But as a standard process of discovery, you learn about the company, what they do, who's their audience, learn a little bit about their team and maybe their history. But it really all boils down to understanding their mission statement or their vision, why they're in business. Because you can have, if I want to start a business, I can do anything, and the founders of any business could have done anything. Why do they choose to be a publisher, or to make sprockets, or to do whatever it is they do? Why does the company exist in the form that it exists? And once you understand that, and companies often express that as a vision statement or a mission statement. And I think once you understand that, that then becomes the North Star, and every piece of content you produce should in some way point back to that. So that becomes an invisible thread, I like to call it, that sort of stitches all the content together, all the communications, social media, internal emails, press releases, posters, TV commercials, whatever the organization wants to do. It's like a great slogan, Nike is the great example, of course. Just do it. Everything they produce can relate back to that. And I think the trick is to interpret that within the piece of content that you're working on. So uh, you want the brand identity and the brand voice to always be pointing back to whatever that mission statement might be. And I don't think AI can really manage that. And it can be very indirect. Like, you might not be talking directly to the values, but they should always be there in the background, kind of pushing the narrative along, because it's the story of the company. And human beings, we know, and there's plenty of research around this, we understand stories. We remember information better when it's presented to us as a story. And a story is much more than the facts. If I say to you, or if you say to me, what happened in the cricket, I can rattle off the stats, and that'll give you some idea of what happened, but it won't tell you really anything about the humanity of it, the drama of it, the feeling of it. And that's when you need somebody to say, well, one team was putting pressure on the other, and they were batting well, and they collapsed, and then you get a story. And that's so much more engaging than just looking at the score sheet. And I think that's what brands need to do. They don't want to give the punters a score sheet. We sell this product for this price. We have this many happy customers. Here's our net promoter score, whatever it might be. You want to tell them, we'll make your life better, we'll make your business better, we'll solve a problem, whatever your organization does. And I think that requires that connection to the human, because people relate to other humans. They don't necessarily relate so well to sheets of.
Also, just interesting to hear from you on what your perspective is on best practice and where it's up to, and kind of just
Yeah.
walk through, like, because I'm probably sure you probably watched the video and were like, oh god.
Yeah, look, I mean, I watch this stuff, and I see, like, Seth Godin is sort of, I think it's Seth Godin, or maybe it was either him or Vaynerchuk said only bad content writers are going to be, and content marketers and marketers are going to be put out of business by AI. I was like, well, it's easy for you to say that, Mister Multi-million-dollar global publishing empire dude. And he's either right or he's wrong. He's either wrong because AI won't get any better and people will soon realize it is rubbish. So he's either right, or he's wrong because it'll put us all out of business. And it depends on. Yeah, it's like the dream client for a content agency is always the one that values, the dream client is the one that values content. And I think you don't have to be like, some books really take off and some films really take off and some music really takes off. And it's not because it's hitting an educated audience that can appreciate the genius. It's this unconscious thing where it just feels better. It reads better. I enjoyed reading that one. I didn't enjoy reading this one. I liked this record, didn't like that record. I really enjoyed this meal from this restaurant, but not that meal from this restaurant. You don't need to be an expert chef who can go and say, well, this steak was expertly seared and the potatoes were just right, and on this one they'd overcooked the thing and used too much salt, whatever, right? You don't. Being an expert can help you understand why a thing has turned out the way it has, but a mug punter can eat, a Gordon Ramsay steak and one I burned on the barbecue the other day and go, that one's much better. And I think that's what happens with brands, right? Is that when a business consistently puts out good quality, interesting content and communications, that kind of gets through, versus the brands that put out these forgettable AI generated fluff that doesn't touch you because it has no. I know I sound like a ridiculous romantic. It has no humanity in it, so it doesn't touch you and it doesn't stick to you. Whereas the stuff that does have that in it will. Maybe AI will be able to get to that point, but I'm inclined to say that at that point, well, it's become a replicant. It's become effectively, if not a human being, then a some kind of self-aware being, because that's really, it's the mystery of life and existence that drives us all and that makes us want to connect.
I agree. I mean, that's the core truth. I dug hours into creating this flow. I dropped a lot of time to just see what was possible, because people have asked me about how do I scale and build out 1,000 blog posts, for example. And one of the key drivers of that,
About
I
a room
think,
full of infinite
is
monkeys.
yeah, kind of like that. But like the key macro drivers, I think, or the examples people read online and why they want to investigate this, is the stories of Canva and Zapier. Both of those have thousands of pages that have been created around the Canva example being a poster for a school or a poster for a marketing event, or like they have these very specific SEO and specific pages and scenarios where they've created content. Zapier does that from an integration perspective, this to that, but it's obviously a formula that they're using, and they have very large resources. They're both billion-dollar companies to execute this. So it's hard
Also,
for an
people.
SMB to look at, and potentially the way to work together is get the content out there, and then once you see something has a click through and it gets some attention from a headline, then go back, write the brief from scratch, hand it over to someone who's human, and turn it into an article that actually has some humanity to it.
I think companies that say we want 1,000 pages of fantastic content that'll pull all the eyeballs to it, they're wanting content that, like, there's a lot of rubbish content out there written by humans, and there's a lot of boring, bland, formulaic content out there written by humans. Because I'm in a content farm, I'm going to get paid $1 to produce this blog post. Don't give a shit. You might as well get AI to do that stuff, because it's going to be of equal value. but it's like creating great art or great literature or great anything. It's hard and it doesn't always work, and you can't really predict when it's going to work. What you can do is create the conditions where it's more likely that your content team will hit. So that is good briefings, a good clear vision statement, so they know what is our North Star, really well put together brand, good quality writers who will actually be, who will give a shit, who get paid enough to give a shit. Like we're always a professional, but if I got a job that's going to pay me $100 and a job's going to pay me $10 for the same amount of work, there's not much question which one's going to be of the higher quality. But it's just hard, and you got to keep on it. Like it's not. I think metrics have been the undoing of marketing in the sense that if it becomes measurable, it's manageable, and so we're all looking for these metrics, and we don't really know. I mean, when Facebook came out, was it 2 or 3 years ago, and said, yeah, all that stuff about the ads was bullshit, we just made that up. Didn't stop them. People, does advertising work or doesn't it, Charles? Because I've seen people saying it has no impact at all, and I've seen people saying it has massive impact, and companies still spend a lot of money on it. But nobody knows. We're hoping it works. And can we really measure it? Maybe. But
Yeah,
again,
absolutely.
because it's human, and it's hard to measure the human. I'm twice as interested in this product as the other product. What does that even mean? If it means that I clicked on 2 articles about this one versus 1 on the other, well, maybe that's twice as interesting. But emotionally, on a human level, what the fuck does that mean? I love you twice as much as I love the other person. I like this one 10% more. They're meaningless statements. And that's why I think in my comments I got a couple like, what does this even mean? Like they're just, it's like word salad. It doesn't mean anything. All you can do is create good content of whatever kind, target and use the AI and all the tools to target it well and to give it the best shot. But there is no guaranteed formula, and that's what a lot of big companies want. They want a formula. This will work. Why? Because the AI tells us. Well, talk to anybody who's run a movie studio. Marvel's running into it right now. All their focus grouped and committee produced movies that should be a hit are flopping. Why? Because they're crap. Because they don't have. I saw an interesting piece the other day talking about content versus creation, and creation is in the. They were talking about film specifically. You have a director or a producer or a scriptwriter who wants to make this movie, tell the story, get it out there, and they drive it through and make it happen. George Lucas wanted to make Star Wars because he loved those old movies. Versus content, which is where the marketing team sits around. Poor marketing teams. I've been on marketing teams. I shouldn't bag them, but they sit around, or the directive comes down. We need another one. We want one of these every year. And so instead of finding creators who are driven to do something, the committee sits around and says, okay, well, we need a princess and a spaceship and a whatever, and you get generic much that gets worse and worse and worse as it goes on because it lacks that spark. Mystery of humanity.
Really strong example in the macro environment between Disney and Marvel and everything that's happening. It's the drive towards generic.
The content, it's going off a cliff because it's not that George Lucas or Martin Scorsese or Steven Spielberg or whoever wanted to tell this story. It's shit, we got a franchise, we need the next installment. And then they get good people on them because they think I'd love to work on a big project like this, and then they fuck them up. Look at the difference between the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit trilogy. Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson pitched it to it was Miramax, wasn't it? And he thought they were going to get 2, and they said, well, isn't there 3 books? Shouldn't you do 3 movies? Off they went. One of the greatest movie trilogies ever made, massive success, minimal studio interference, and they trusted Jackson to do his job. The Hobbit, massive studio interference. Jackson arguably shouldn't have even done it, but they wanted they wanted a hero character. They didn't feel as a hero character, so the studio just kept on putting in all this stuff instead of letting the creator do his thing. And that trilogy, I don't know if it bombed at the box office, but it's not a patch on Lord of the Rings commercially and critically. It's absurdly bad. It's laughably bad. It's embarrassingly bad. Content versus creativity.